So I'm glad that we ended on that last piece showing the sort of emotional control of the dress, because where I want to take this talk is more the mundane, everyday kind of wearables that everyday people would buy in Best Buy, et cetera. And while there's a lot of discussion of things like form factor and the aesthetics, what I want to focus on is what I'm calling here wearable self-regulation, which does resonate in this last piece of Hussein. As Leila mentioned, in the context of MIT, as I would suspect most of us in this room are well aware of, wearables have this very rich history. Here's just two images. I'm not even going to name all the people up here. Many of these early wearables take the form of backpack-mounted computers, headgear, glasses, webcams, and a lot of them have the function of enhancing your ability to see, to know, to record, and sometimes to transcend the material world and turn one into a kind of cyborg. I'm not going to exhaustively go through this, but it's one of the many timelines you can find of wearables. MIT figures prominently. And here we have coming up two examples by Steve Mann, for example, his wearable backpack camera and later webcam. And then on to some of the more mass market, the iPod, et cetera, products we're familiar with. And it ends here in 2014, the year of the wearable, it's christened. And the backstory to the year of the wearable is actually the year before, 2013, which was christened by Forbes after the Consumer Electronics Show in early 2013, the year of the quantified self. And this, of course, is a reference to the now international group Quantified Self, or QS, started by two editors at Wired magazine. And here are some of the stories that have been done around QS. And as you can see, this is a community that ascribes to this quest for self-knowledge through numbers. As in the tagline, this is very much an ethical project in the sense that numerical metrics, self-quantification, self-experimentation, and statistical correlation becomes a kind of means to the good life, to figure out what is an ethical life to live, how do I want to live and be in the world. And for most in QS, I would say that wearables are secondary in the sense that they are a means to the numbers through which you can know yourself. So front and center is the ethical project here. And popular media has seen the rise of a kind of visual trope of the quantified person who's rigged up with all of this sensory-laden wearables. As you see here, just three examples. Just sort of giving you this for the visuality of it. Here are more cartoon-like animations that also bring us closer to the terrain of the everyday guy, like the two at the end there. And these convey a sense of the body being augmented and added to, not only to increase human insight and knowledge, but also to expand human reach and capacities. So these images are kind of in line with the MIT cyborgian vision and the guys standing on the roof. But I want to suggest that there's a different trajectory to wearables. And this is a trajectory that's become salient recently and very connected to the digital and the extension of digital tools to the masses, so to speak. And this trajectory leads to everyday consumer technologies that are not primarily designed to help us optimize or enhance or surpass ourselves and the material world, but to help us cope with our existential fallibilities in material environments that in many ways challenge our flourishing. So these kind of wearables are designed, I would say, no matter how they're sometimes marketed, if you really look underneath that, and sometimes directly in the marketing and the rhetoric of it, they're designed primarily to help us maintain, cope, deal, abide with everyday life. Here's just a smattering of the kinds of technologies out there. And this has happened, the sort of bringing to the mass market of the vision of quantified self has happened through so-called quantrepreneurs who started attending QS meetings and then making startups, et cetera. And most notably, when we think of this kind of mass market wearable technology, we think of Fitbit, Apple Watch, et cetera. And at first, I've been tracking this since around 2009. 2010. And at first, the know yourself logic of QS was simply ported over into the mainstream. The entrepreneurs sort of took that out and brought it into the advertisements and into the technology, providing people with a lot of information about themselves. But that didn't work so well, and there was a whole lot of discussion about that, and I would go to the Consumer Electronics show, and there'd be these really polemical panels like, what are we gonna do? We're challenged, how can we make this work? Because it seemed that the mass markets, again, so to speak, didn't have the time, the resources, or really even the desire to embark on this kind of ethical project. So the language and logic of design shifted in degrees away from knowing yourself towards the device knowing you. And so you see that just in one of many ads I could have put up here. This is for the Samsung wristband, which tells us the device can know me better than I know myself and can help me be a better human. So absolutely in this sentence, we see preserved the ethical project of becoming a better human, living a more fulfilling life. However, that's happening through a device that knows you better than you know yourself. That's a significant step in this direction that I'm heading in. And as we'll see in the rest of my comments, there have been further steps that go beyond this even, away from knowledge altogether towards actionability, which is a word you hear a lot by wearable designers, and sort of frictionless guidance rather than knowledge. And this guidance tends to happen at a really basic material register. For example, the rudimentary aspects of bodily existence that I have put up here. So stepping, sitting, standing, sipping, chewing, breathing. Sort of things you learn to do mostly when you're an infant. So what I'll do next is take you on a whirlwind tour through some of the products that address these areas. And I hope you'll see in the examples, wearables are not simply a kind of passive casing for digital logics, but they have become a buzzing, tapping, vibrating material. The digital is embedded in the material and vice versa in these examples. And I will show some video clips. And I'm going to start with this early video from Fitbit, which has become a kind of, Fitbit is sort of a metonym for consumer wearables. That's how I explain my project to people, like Fitbit, and they say, oh, okay, I get it. So here we could just get the sound up. This, if not, I'll talk over it. People are going about their lives. There's this kind of digital overlay. We get the sense that we can just play in the backyard and trust the device we're wearing to capture the information we're generating so that we don't have to monitor or track ourselves. So calories burned, distance covered, duration of activity. It's all here in this dashboard being taken care of us. I love this scene. He pauses. It's this existential moment. Metro versus walking. And then he makes this decision. He sets out on the pathway, he shares it with his friends, and he's just feeling great. I also love this part of the ad because you see in the concentric rings around the feet this kind of otherwise invisible data exhaust that you're giving off that's radiating out and that has this value that is being captured. And it ends, I said here we're looking at stepping, but it ends up in bed and it says we can track even when you are not moving and asleep. And so on that note, let's look now at stillness here in the case of standing. We'll get to sitting a little later. So a lot of wearables focus primarily on bodily stillness, how you hold yourself, your posture, and helping you maintain proper posture. This is LumoLift technology, and it corrects your posture through vibration. Here's what you read in the product literature. Through the app, you can control when you're buzzed, how you're buzzed, and even how intensely it buzzes, which sounds a little erotic, but here, I'm not sure whether we can have sound now.
It's a magnetic sensor worn like a clasp or lapel pin on your upper body, either as jewelry or hidden under your clothes. Lift tracks your body positions and movements. When you slouch or close off your body, LumoLift provides a gentle vibration to remind you to keep your shoulders down and back and head lifted. Lift also connects to an app that tracks your posture, giving you gentle nudges to help you improve over time.
So there's definitely a heavy kind of coaching element here, but still information being imparted. Now we look at sipping, and there's so many of these out there, and I find most of them so ugly that I just put a prototype drawing up here. But hydration, another mundane yet vital human action, part of our daily subsistence. This is the focus of many of these kind of gadgets. They keep track of how much liquid is consumed, and then they convey it to your smartphone, and your smartphone has a program that will alert you if you're not hydrated enough. Of course, according to the algorithm. So I'm not focusing on that so much in this talk, but of course the algorithm is really important here in determining what shape guidance should take. So some of these will adjust your goals based on temperature or humidity and provide feedback in various kind of visual and haptic ways. So they may vibrate, change color, blink lights, and of course the smartphone notification. So I count these as wearables in the sense that they're meant to be carried around all day and accompany you. So we don't need sound on this one, but here it shows, like it's morning and you should be waking up with this in your hand, and you should keep it in your hand, and you take the subway, walk down the street, and it's really part of your outfit, and now it's nighttime and still you're wearing, it goes on and on. Chewing, okay, so stepping, sipping, sitting, standing, here's the happy fork, and this is designed to intervene. It's a smart utensil in the habit of feeding, and it monitors and records the length of each meal, the number of fork servings per meal, and the time between the servings. So if shorter than 10 seconds, as we'll see, it will oscillate so that the eater knows to slow down. And so here's two of the screens. You'll see you are advised, I'm reading from the product literature, you're advised to take about 10 to 20 chews. If you trigger the alarm by eating too fast, don't panic. Set the fork down at the side of the plate and wait until the light turns green again, signaling that it is safe to take another bite. So this is presented as an everyday technology that really, in effect, turns something as routine, as human, as basic, as material, as a single bite of food into a matter of potential danger. And we'll come back to this theme of danger. So the company recommends, of course, despite this idea of the basket on the table where you put your phone away, most of the ads show mostly women with their forks, their phones, and their food. It's not such a social thing. So as you eat, you feed yourself, and your data is then fed back to you, and it's this little loop. We don't need the sound here. This is just to show you it vibrates when you eat too fast. So as you're eating, oops, too fast. Then you're logging and you're looking at your metrics. So there's some self-reflection here. There's some self-knowledge. Again, the erotics of this are there for somebody else to talk about. And then here she does, great timing. So really, I see this as a kind of techno-dressage or sort of algorithmic entrainment for eating that is happening. And just this final example of breathing, right? The most elemental, you could say, aspect of existence. This is also a technology of entrainment. It's called the Spire, and it helps you regulate your breath, and by extension, your stress levels. So it alerts you when your respiration becomes shallow, erratic, or too fast. For instance, you're in a tense streak, or time for a breath, et cetera. So again, as your actions and states are fed into the data streams are fed back into your actions and states and become a part of your a material aspect of your experience. And another version of this sort of takes on both posture and breath. So this is more focused on sitting. This is posture correcting wearables. Let me play this. Again, we don't need the sound. Another author has recently written on this, that these technologies are imagined as, this is when she's not wearing it, right? Imagined as active agents, as coaches and trainers who call users to attention when slouching is detected. So it really is seen as a kind of, maybe we will put sound on now.
Heart rate increases, along with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. So we've designed Prana to counter these unhealthy trends.
Prana consists of multiple accelerometers, advanced algorithms, and a low-energy Bluetooth connection to a smartphone. All these work together to track both your breathing and posture from just a single location on your waistband. When your breathing shows signs of stress or your posture is poor, Prana gently notifies you.
You hear the buzzing.
It's time to sit upright, take a big belly breath, and refocus on your body for a moment.
Okay, so you get the idea. So let's step back for a moment now. What is an anthropologist of technology to make of all of this as a mode of self-regulation, in which chewing and sitting have become dangerous things. In the environment, there's this idea that the environment is hostile. And we are talking here about, there's been laughing. These are mundane consumer landscapes that are very unlike refugee camps, very unlike outer space. Both of these things, which we've heard a little bit about, we'll hear more about at this gathering. But nonetheless, there's a big market around this, and these environments are figured as toxic choice architecture that really hobbles our ability to thrive, and this technology sort of steps on the scene to help us with that. The selves of self-tracking are understood by those who are invested in wearable technology to be choosing agents, agents of the market, and that their well-being depends on the market choices that they make. And when those choices sort of slide away from being savvy and vigilant, they're going to be harmful. And the idea is that although that's the case, that we need to be savvy and vigilant, we just can't. We are fallible humans. We lack the knowledge. We lack the foresight, the resources, et cetera, to navigate this abundance of potential choice in this kind of mall of life. And so the wearable tech industry very consciously banks on that double insecurity. So the customers they imagine are really unsure whether to trust their own senses and desires and bodily intuitions as they move about the world, making these basic material choices of when and what to eat and drink, how much to move or rest, how slow or fast to breathe. And the idea is that the technology can help us take the guesswork out of those challenges. And on the one hand, they are acting as a kind of digital compass that's providing us information, helping us navigate modern life in this dashboard kind of fashion to help kind of weave our way through this confounding landscape with a smile on our face, because we feel like we know what to do, how to manage our lifestyles. So you can consult in these 3 images on the wrist, on a pendant, on the screen, and get this guidance on these prosaic decisions about how much to move, hydrate, eat, and sleep. But increasingly, and this is what I want to kind of end up on, they're designed not just to offer information that we can take in and use to reflect on ourselves in this ethical project, but to act, as one designer put it, quote, in the fashion of a thermostat. So the idea is that mass market tracking technology, unlike the kind that might appeal to the geeks or the engineers, needs to do more than just give information and self-knowledge on our micro rhythms and our little micro choices, that it needs to steer those choices through material interventions and prompts like taps and buzzes. And I've been calling this micro nudges. And referring back to Nicholas's opening remarks, I'd say this is an attempt to get us to experience our bits. And if it's not exactly that the medium is the message, certainly it's that the message is intimately folded into the medium and that the message has material matter to it. And so the idea is for devices to kind of serve as these caring thermostats who will nudge us for our own good and that will know us better than we know ourselves, know in advance what we need, and then, quote, give actionable updates before you even need to ask. As one pundit puts it, and that particular person, it was Leslie Zaliger, says, I don't want to track, I want it to be done for me, insert a chip in my mouth, have it record the calories. That would be her, the holy grail of tracking for her. And so this is imagined really as a kind of care, a kind of delegating of the tedious labor of self-care and self-regulation in a world that we can't cope with on our own. And on this note of care, I want to end up with the final example I'll give. which is a device called Mother, which almost too nicely captures this externalization of responsibility onto technology. Whatever you want, whenever you want. It's sort of the all-knowing mother, really the mother of the infant, right? Who's there before the infant even knows they're hungry. And so if before it was about know thyself, now it's about, here if you can read, Mother knows everything. And this device isn't exactly wearable, but it uses sensors called motion cookies. And you can put them on different things and on yourself, and then they will intercede to quench your thirst before you might know that you need to drink something. I need to drink more water. It helps me concentrate. I affix a sensor to the bottle, which then you're holding. It encourages me to drink when you forget. It can remind you to take your pills. It can wake you up in the morning, and this is the final video segment I'll play, and we can have sound. Okay, so we've moved on. My 20 minutes are almost up, so I'll wrap up. We've moved on from this strict definition of wearables, as I said, but I think it really captures the kind of material digital care that's at stake in this mode of self-regulation. And when you follow this line of wearable technology versus the kind of strategic, the shoe that cheats the roulette game, or the self-optimizing, self-expanding, unconstrained human vision that people like Mann and others had, you end up quite far from the sort of cyborg that those visions conjure up. These wearables are quite different. They're focusing, as I said, on the basic material aspects of lives. And I think the selves who are wearing them are also quite different. These are selves who are not out to optimize or expand, but really to maintain and to cope in this world that they are materially bound to, but have difficulty navigating. So in a way, this is outsourcing, in some sense, the ethical project to digital technology. And had I had more time, and maybe in the Q&A it can come up, just very quickly, alternative future for wearables. I don't want to end up on a totally individualizing, privatizing note, because there are ways that people have come up with and are beginning to increasingly of not using these to just focus on yourself and sidestep systemic reform, like let's regulate the food industry, et cetera, but to collectively change the environments in which we live. So you see around the world wearing individual wearable devices on your body, but crowdsourcing it to monitor pollution. And so there's all sorts of little dongles and things where you can then crowdsource the data and presumably use this for policy change. So I'll end there. Thank you.